When the time had finally come to send the investigator on her way, everyone had been assembled for the handover of the lists and a few copies of interest. Even the people from the vault were allowed up to get some fresh air and some better-made food than could be managed down below just for the one day. "Will that be all?" Lancaster questioned the investigator, as she ceremoniously handed over the inventory list. "I believe so. Thank you for getting this done in such a timely manner. I will be departing post-haste with Galaxa, heading for the capital. Expect company in 2 weeks' time. Then we shall see. In the meantime, I recommend you make yourself as familiar as possible with what has been found. We will be getting to the next vaults in due time. So, please, do try to refrain from blowing them up unless we say so," she replied, rolling up the copy of the inventory list. "And perhaps make use of the opportunity to relax a little. There's going to be a lot of work ahead of us." "I think we can manage that," Lancaster replied with a bow. "Going to be easier when we don't have to mind our mouths or risk execution," Seth grumbled to herself. They pretty much all let out a unified sigh of relief as Galaxa climbed off into the distance. The precious, if unwelcome, cargo on board. "Right, now what?" Seth had questioned, looking around at all of them. "Well, I guess we carry on where we left off. We have a festival to plan and a little dragon's hoard of knowledge to go through," Tom replied with a shrug. "I say we divvy it up and get to work." "Hey, we're not that greedy," Jarrett protested, receiving little sympathy. "So, hands up who wants to go look in the most historic find of historical records in our lifetime," Apuma went, excitedly raising his hand. A fair few keep dwellers, including Lancaster, and of course the entirety of the academic division following suit. "Good God, it's like being at summer camp," Tom mused to himself, raising his hand. "Ah, come on. I want to make more guns," Jackie protested, as she saw Tom's hand. "But they have steampunk airships down there," Tom tried to protest, receiving a disapproving look from Jackie, though it was clear she was running the calculations on what would lead to more awesomeness. "Tom, how about we get you some interesting things to look at? Perhaps you could come down every now and again, and then you focus on the defense of our home," the Nook went, in the sweetest or more likely diplomatic voice she could muster. "Fine," Tom replied, lowering his hand again. "I guess I'll get to see it eventually." "Yes!" Jackie went with a little jump. "Now, who wants to make shit and throw a party?" To no one's surprise, that resulted in most of the key dwellers raising their hands, including a rather reluctant Dakota. "I guess someone will have to calculate the expenses." "Oh, don't be such a downer, old Dak. Harvest starts tomorrow now that we have Miss Troublesome out of the way," Ralph joined in. "We are going to be rich," Rapona added, the two farmers doing the jumping high five. "Oh, you lot don't need to worry about getting all dirty. We got this," she continued, looking at the bewildered crowd of academics. "Very good. Everyone go do your thing. Jarrix, you are taking your crew in Dakota to go tell Deriva what's up, and the slight change in schedule. Remember, we definitely haven't found anything down below yet." "I got it. There better be a hot deal waiting when I get back," Jarrix protested, licking his chops. "I'll see if I can manage to catch your dinner for you while playing ferry," Glera added with a laugh. "Or perhaps His Excellence could do a spot of hunting on the way back home." "Shut up, Mum. It was a joke. Just not a very funny one. I said shut up." In hindsight, staying at the keep and just getting the most awesome tidbits of info was great for productivity, but it really sucked that he had to wait for them to get back with more info when they found something really interesting. Then again, judging by the fact even Apuma had been struggling to read some of this stuff, Tom probably didn't stand much of a chance with anything other than the translated copies anyway. His reading had improved quite a bit, and he was getting better quickly now too. The documents did make good evening reading, and as a side bonus it had proven surprisingly effective at getting Jackie to fall asleep more or less on command. Something about technobabble, designed to kill, just seemed to calm her right down. Things like flash powder injection, variable geometry turbines, self-adjusting air brakes, and power outputs measured in ox power, which was too fucking hilarious. He had always expected Frost to be in dragons and demi-dragons, but sadly not. Of course, the heart of the system, the flight core as they called it, was by far the most interesting part. Tom still thought that was a stupid name, but hey, it sort of worked. He needed to crack how the thing worked though. No use just to float upwards uncontrollably after all. Not to mention his last device couldn't even lift Sapphire using a full cylinder of the oil. The temperatures and pressures they were working with were just hilarious. But throw magic metal and enchantments at the problem and he guessed it would hold. Even if it would be damn hard to replicate. It didn't seem to have anything to do with propulsion, even if it was a touch hard to tell. He didn't have anything other than sketch copies made by the academics, and they were skilled, but their technical drawing abilities were a bit lacking for the task at hand to say the least. but Yrrol said no originals came out of the cave, so he had to make do with what he had. Judging by what he had, they used mainly big-ass propellers and the like to deliver thrust, but one of the smaller craft had something that looked suspiciously like a rocket engine. It was all very complicated, but the result did look like a pocket-sized rocket. The fuel consumption rates looked a little crazy, and it definitely used gravity ore somehow, but so did the outputs for such a small device. The little fighter-like craft that they had found the blueprints for only used 2 of the little rockets, and it should be capable of kissing 700 km per hour in a dive, despite its less than stellar aerodynamics. This is assuming his conversion had been correct. On the level, the listed top speed was around 450 km per hour, far faster than any dragon could go, to Tom's knowledge. Hell, Jax was supposed to be one of the fastest around, and in the little timed run they had done a while back, he had struck to break 200 without a dive to accelerate. When he was allowed to dive into the run, he managed nearly 250, but it was easy to tell that was not something that he could hold for much more than a minute or two. What really stumped Tom was a realization there was no rated service ceiling for the fighter, not even a mention of it. The level speed was rated at something which translated to 40,000 paces, whatever that was. The guns of the fighters were rather normal, if a little underwhelming actually. 2 machine guns chambered in somewhere around 15mm. The rate of fire was impressive though. Looking at the craft's design, it would seem weight was still a problem for them. The heavy drives, spoilers, flight core control systems and armament were all packed in as tight as it would go, creating a labyrinth of pipes, hoses and cables that was nearly impossible to understand, especially on the subpar copy of the design. It seemed that it was mostly made of steel, with a hand-hammered aluminium skin. At least the blueprints seemed to describe a very light, soft metal, so that seemed likely to Tom, unless they had an alternative. It was all very fascinating stuff, but sadly he did have more pressing matters to attend to as he got up, leaving the snoring Jackie alone in the bed. He did have to admit that he felt a little inadequate looking over at his design for a single-shot shotgun, in comparison to the masterclass in mechanical and aerospace engineering he had in his hands, especially considering that the first one had actually blown up on the first shot. At least he no longer had to argue about safety procedures. In fact, Dakota had made him tighten up on that front. So with a soundtrack of Jackie snoring happily, it was as good a time as any to get this done. They couldn't have these blow up in their hands after all, not unless they wanted to give some to the enemy. Jarrex had returned with news that Deriva had accepted their requests. They had gone with the idea of just sending everyone rather than leaving a rearguard, reasoning that there wasn't really much worth taking back at the keep, and what there was they could bring easily enough. Should it happen, they had more than enough combat power to take it back should that become necessary. Victoria even approved of the strategy. Saf believed the Colonel was almost hoping any Darklings in hiding would take the bait, then have them annihilated. For Saf, that meant she had almost come to savour the times when she would sit down with Tom to both help him in the workshop and receive a bit of tutelage in turn. Most of her days were now spent on hunting, gathering, or preparing for both the feast and the supplies Deriva would be taking back home. Not that they knew that, of course. Today, though, was a special day for all of them. It was Harvest Day. "Time to dig up some money," Ralph had gone, rubbing his hands together after he had finished handing out what implements they had for getting the beets out of the ground. They had pulled the first one yesterday, and it had looked good. Tom gave it the seal of approval, despite admitting he didn't actually know what one was supposed to look like. But the size fit what it said in the book, so they were coming up today. Baron had relieved Glera on hunting duty, which had been quite the sight to see yesterday, even if the results had probably been best served as a stew, or maybe ground into pre-smoked sausages. He and Victoria elected to stick around to see what it was they were digging up today, before going on another hunting trip. Looking back, Baron's display of firepower might have been a tactical decision to avoid being tasked with assisting with farm work, not that they had any chance of forcing the old red to take part. He and Victoria had decided to watch from a distance with most of their crew. Only Maiko actually took part in the fieldwork, much to the amusement of the rest of the crew. It had certainly been no surprise, though, when Jarrex had asked if he could help. Saf had nearly broken out laughing at the expression on Baron's face, as he had sat there looking at all of them dignified. Then the sheer shock had hit him, followed by an internal debate that shone through like a beacon. The venerable old dragon seemingly was not quite certain if he should reprimand or praise the younger dragon. Victoria had just gone over to give Tom a solid pat on the shoulder, when Jarrex was distracted by Rolf and Wapurna. The farmers and the young dragon soon had a system up, with Jarrex digging down either side of the row of beets with his front legs as he shuffled backwards. Then they just had to pick them up and load them into baskets to be taken into the keep. In the end, it didn't even end up taking an hour, as Jarrex backpedaled down the rows, dirt flying everywhere. He even looked like he was enjoying himself. He definitely did when he accidentally flung some dirt at an unsuspecting target. One shot actually knocked one guy to the ground, much to their amusement. "Why, oh why, did we have you before?" Ralph let out in glee, as he tossed another beet into Sass's basket. "I was too expensive," Jax retorted with a deep, throaty laugh. "Don't forget I'm getting a bath in the lake after this." "You can bet your tail on that, you big blue beauty." "I have to ask, how did you do that? You've given him his payment," Victoria had questioned Tom, after taking him aside in the middle of all the work. "He's never wanted to do anything other than sit around before. Maybe show off or take a nice leisurely flight." "Sit around with his friends, if I remember right," Tom went, gesturing at the field. "His friends are now working. It also helps that when you feel like you're a part of something, and the others are doing hard work, you end up feeling bad. He's a very good kid, after all." "Huh. But he has already gotten a machine gun," was all the response Victoria had for that, as she stood there dumbfounded. "Yup, and this is the reason he got it. He's done it. He's now a part of this place. He will fight for it, we will fight for him. As such, we will equip him." "So what you are saying is, if we fight for your keep, which we are ordered to do, not considering our little agreement," Victoria replied, rather leniently before Tom cut her off. "What happens if the Inquisition decides to wipe us out? Will you be the one to do it?" That comment clearly didn't sit well with Victoria, as she pondered how to respond with a sneer on her face, failing to come up with a reply. Tom knew that wasn't a fair question. The Colonel didn't strike him as a bad person, but she was a Colonel after all. "I know you wouldn't want to, but you are also a soldier." "And you think Jarex isn't?" she replied with an edge to her tone. "Not sure anymore. I think he would at least be torn." "And you think I would not be torn when it comes to the extermination of people whose only crime is breathing?" "I still think you would do it." "You're probably right," Victoria relented, looking back to the merry band hard at work in the field. "Do you think they will order us exterminated when they have what they want?" Tom questioned, going to retie his bootlaces. "Sounds like Jolena wouldn't. No telling about the rest of them," the Colonel admitted reluctantly. "If they want to open their vaults, they are going to want you, that's for sure. Knowledge is useless if you don't know what to do with it." "So our main hope is that an ice-cold woman who cracks minds open as a pastime might want me for her pet project," Tom replied with a deep sigh. "As much as it pains me to say it. And whatever you do, don't say that to her face." "I figured as much. Nothing we can do to help their case?" "Don't make a mess of the current situation," Victoria retorted with a slight sigh. "At least I think this is a bit more than a pet project. Knowing her, she will move heaven and hell to get it done." "Right. Don't die, pretend everything is normal, and wait for the important people to do their thing. Very well. Step 1. We have work to do and fun to be had. Then we can pray later that everything is going to be just fine," Tom replied, before walking off back to the field to lend a hand. Well, Saf had finally gotten a break from the more tiring work, currently being assigned to decoration creation with some of the kids. They were working with a bit of hodgepodge materials, various scraps of leather, parchment and paper, most of it sketches Tom had thrown out. They had both the red paint that had been bought as well as the old-fashioned blue to make it all look pretty though. Esmeralda had taken some of the kids that were old enough to fly out to pick flowers and other pretty things to decorate the tables. That is to say, Saf had Kieran, who had for once been lured away from Tom, the twins, who seemed to like sitting down and be artsy, Tunia, who was happily helping Kieran, Lothal and Gennaro, though the baby obviously wasn't much use aside from crawling around a little and playing a bit with whatever she could get her hands on. It wasn't good for productivity, but it was catastrophically cute. It did feel a little weird sitting here doing arts and crafts while everyone else was doing something incredibly important, and she was making streamers with a bunch of kids. Not that she minded. Seth had gotten her fill of stressful, hard or important work as of late. This was all very nice and relaxing. In her little zone out, she had missed the kids' conversation changing to a one-upping competition on what kind of magic they wanted to get when they grew up. "I want to breathe lightning like Jarex," Kieran had piped up, doing his best little roar then looking very proud of himself. "Wouldn't that hurt?" one of the twins had questioned. "Not if it's magic. Right, Saf?" "I have no idea. Never heard of someone breathing lightning before." "Jarex?" the other twin went, raising their hand. Saf honestly couldn't tell which was which. It didn't help that she had never seen two kids look that alike. "Jarex is not Dragonette," Tunia retorted with an exaggerated sigh. "Clearer?" the guy tried again with equal enthusiasm. Saf let out a bit of a chuckle as Kieran did his best, a very over-exaggerated facepalm. "I want to breathe lightning like Jarex. He's cool." "What about Tom?" Don't you think he's pretty cool? Saf tried with a bit of a snicker. Tom is best, but Tom have no magic, Kieran stated matter-of-factly. It was hard to argue with that assessment, though. If Tom get magic, then I want that. Do humans get magic, Saf? The first of the twins asked, looking up from their delicate project. Not where they come from. Here we have no idea, Saf replied, with a smile and a shrug. I heard he has magic, the second twin piped up. Yeah, but Jackie don't like when he uses it. She keeps screaming and shouting at him when he does, the second twin added. Sam's eyes going wide as she frantically tried to figure out what the fuck to say in that situation. No, you dum-dum, they are practicing. Tom need learn sword fight, Kieran stated matter-of-factly. Ooh, both the twins went in unison, nodding to each other. Oh, thank whoever is listening, Saf went to herself, noticing her heart was actually pounding a little. Oh, Saf, show them yours, Kieran went, looking up at Saf with a pleading expression. Saf didn't need much of an excuse to show off a little, as she hardly needed the energy for this job. She took a quick breath, then lifted the shears she was holding. Not bad, hey? She questioned, looking around at them. Gennaro crawled over, attempting to grab the shears. Saf moved them up a bit higher before grabbing them out of the air, taking a deep breath. Now, shears are sharp. We can't have you playing with those now, can we? Saf went, taking Gennaro into her lap. And we are all wondering what might happen with you. Grah! Gennaro went, reaching for the shears in Saf's hand. Fine, I'll do a bit more. Saf got a little brush instead. The shears were a little heavy, after all, and lifted it above Gennaro as she played with it. Gennaro sat happily babbling and trying to grab the floating brush, finally managing to grab it and seeming displeased she didn't start floating herself, looking pleadingly up at Saf. I know you aren't very big yet, but you are still too heavy, Saf replied with a chuckle, as she pulled around the brush a little, despite the strain. It was just so cute to look at. Then before she really grasped what was happening, Gennaro's eyes went pale white, and the baby lifted off the ground with a gleeful shriek. Saf quickly cut the flow of magic, Gennaro falling back into her lap. That was so cool, Kieran shouted out, standing up. Again, the twins went in unison. Tonio just looking curiously at her own brush. Saf just sat there for a second, contemplating what had just happened, looking down at the baby. I guess that answers that question, she finally went to herself. Lothal, keep an eye on them, would you? I'm just going to go see Nanook real quick. Okay, the older boy replied, not moving from his station off the little assembly line. I'm going to come too, Kieran predictably went as Saf stood up. No, you just stay here. We still need to have Jarrett's decked out. He won't be pleased if they aren't up to standard. Okay, Kieran went a little reluctantly, sitting back down with the garlands he was working on. Saf had done her best to keep Gennaro happy, letting the baby play with her finger as she made her way upstairs, looking for the Nook, politely knocking on the door to her room. Come in, the familiar voice came from inside. Opening the door, she found the old lady looking over a large tome full of numbers. Oh, Saf, come in. What is it? I think we just found out what happens with the whole unicorn blood situation, Saf replied, holding out Gennaro a little before clutching the baby back into her chest. Go on, Nanook replied, turning around to face Saf after putting the quill down. I think she can amplify magic. Huh. So what you are saying is we have a 1-year-old that can do what? She made my magic stronger. I was just playing a bit with a brush. She grabbed onto it, and obviously I couldn't lift her. Then I just could. It was easy too. It took a bit of the Nook looking for the right words, going to speak a few times before thinking better of it. Why? The lady finally went, staring ahead blankly. Why? Saf echoed curiously, tilting her head ever so slightly. Why do these things just keep on happening? We have riches of knowledge beyond compare. A person from another world, an ancient tomb of ancient history beneath us, the Inquisition breathing down our necks, royal guard everywhere, and now we have a baby blessed with a unicorn which just so happens to develop strong magic at age 1, Nanook replied, shoulders slouching. What is it with this year? I gave up on trying to figure that out a while ago, Saf replied, giving Gennaro a finger to play with again. Gods, I wish I could do that, Nanook replied, going over to tickle the baby a little. At least there won't be any young ones this year. I guess you will have to do. You are a cute one, though. Yeah, I guess no one wanted kids in the middle of all this. And thank October for that. Anyway, so how did she do it? Nanook responded, looking down at the little one. Her eyes just went moon white, then she simply took off. Right. Well, I guess we just need to keep an eye on her. She's just a kid after all. We can't start training her anytime soon. At least none of the other children have magic for her to enhance. I'll let everyone know at dinner. Then I guess we'll just have to see. Can do, Saf replied, playing a little with the baby's snout, which earned her a nip on the finger. Oh, so you want to fight now, do you? Yeah, Gennaro replied, spreading out arms, wings, and legs, looking up at Saf. Good. We are going to need real fighters.